Myanmar's military assumed control of the country in a coup in the early hours of Monday, February the 1st. It wasn't a total surprise, as some of the military's leaders had been huffing and puffing out loud about the November general elections when Aung San Suu Kyi's NLD party won all but 33 seats of the 476-seat National Parliament, a landslide by any measure. State counsellor Aung San Suu Kyi, a Nobel laureate, and several other NLD leaders were arrested in early morning raids conducted with military precision. It was a bloodless coup by the generals, complaining of election fraud in the November 8 election. They cited alleged evidence in their reasons for the coup. None has been presented to the Burmese people at this time. The army say they will take control for 12 months under emergency powers granted to them in the country's constitution, a constitution cobbled together by the generals to ensure they never really lost a grip on the control levers. The military takeover comes just 5 years after Aung San Suu Kyi won political leadership of the country after 5 decades of military rule. Although she won the popular vote, she was prevented from taking the country's reins as president due to her years of military detention. So she became the de facto president, taking on the new position of state counsellor. The fragile new democracy was in for a rocky road. The next week will be pivotal in both how the new junta tries to establish itself as a legitimate government in the eyes of the world, and how the rest of the world reacts to the blunt tool of a military coup. Thailand's PM Prayut Chan-o-cha has made a short initial comment on the matter, saying it was important for ASEAN nations to take a collective stand. He said, "We are neighbouring countries. We also need to listen to ASEAN's stance. I don't want any conflict to escalate, particularly in Thailand." For their part, ASEAN has commented, "We recall the purpose and the principles enshrined in the ASEAN Charter, including the adherence to the principles of democracy, the rule of law and good governance, respect for and protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms." China says it hopes all sides in Myanmar can manage their differences within the constitutional and legal framework and uphold stability. Neighbouring Bangladesh called for peace and stability in Myanmar, mentioning the continuation of voluntary repatriation of Rohingya refugees. Australia's Foreign Minister expressed deep concern and called on the military to respect the rule of law. Iran's Foreign Ministry spokesperson expressed serious concerns about the conditions and rights of minorities of all kinds, describing the move as a quasi-coup. US President Joe Biden said the military takeover is a direct assault on the country's transition to democracy and the rule of law. The EU's condemned the military seizure of power, demanding that it releases all of those it's detained in yesterday's morning raids. The UN has strongly condemned the declaration of the transfer of all legislative, executive and judicial powers to the military, saying these developments represent a serious blow to democratic reforms in Myanmar. India's Foreign Ministry said it noted the developments in Myanmar with deep concern, India also sharing borders with Myanmar. Singapore's Foreign Minister urged all sides in Myanmar to show restraint, and British PM Boris Johnson condemned the coup, saying the vote of the people must be respected and civilian leaders released. 20 other nations have also expressed deep concern or outright condemnation of the situation, except for longtime Cambodian leader Hun Sen, who referred to the coup as the internal affairs of the country. According to its Facebook page, Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy called on people in Myanmar to resist the military coup, a preemptive post before Suu Kyi was detained. They clearly knew what was about to happen. The message in Burmese called the actions of the military unjustified and said they went against both the constitution and the will of the voters. It warned of a return to military dictatorship. Putting Suu Kyi's shortcomings aside regarding the Rohingya issue, let's check the facts of the situation. The Burmese military openly disputed the results of the November election, citing election fraud, in one case complaining that some 8.6 million votes were allegedly fraudulent. Suu Kyi's NLD won a landslide victory, capturing 396 out of 476 seats, which should have given the party a solid mandate to form a government for 5 more years. The military-backed Union Solidarity and Development Party won a mere 33 seats. Now, even if 8.6 million votes had been fake, it still wouldn't have been enough to stem the massive landslide support for the NLD. On January the 29th, Myanmar's Election Commission rejected allegations by the military that the election was fraudulent, stating there was no evidence to support the claims. On the same day as the Election Commission ruling, several Western diplomatic missions, including the US and EU, issued a statement urging the military and all other parties in the country to adhere to democratic norms. As of yesterday, the levers of control in Myanmar have been seized by 65-year-old Senior General Min Aung Hlaing, as announced on the military-owned television station. He was named the Army Commander-in-Chief in 2011, taking over during a transfer to a quasi-civilian government following nearly 5 decades of direct military rule. But despite the outward niceties of a popular woman leading the Southeast nation into a new era of democracy, the military commander-in-chief retained powerful influence, including being the direct commander of the Defence Forces, Border Affairs and Home Affairs ministries, the big ticket items that left the army as a powerful force without restraint. International political experts are speculating that the coup may have been engineered by the head of the army for personal reasons. For decades, the senior general used his position to ensure his family could retain lucrative business interests in Myanmar, a situation he'd be unable to protect after stepping down from the position or his retirement. In July 2019, the senior general and 3 other Burmese military leaders were barred from travelling to the US for their roles in the ethnic cleansing of the country's Rohingya Muslim minority. Further sanctions were placed on the military leaders in December of the same year to freeze any US assets and prohibit any Americans from doing business with them. Other countries have also placed bars on doing business with the Burmese junta and specific generals. There is also speculation that the generals were unhappy with the minor concessions made to help repatriate the ethnic Rohingya. The Burmese army's direct attacks on the Rohingya and their plan of ethnic cleansing started for real in August 2017. On August the 25th, Rohingya insurgents armed with knives and homemade bombs attacked more than 30 police posts in northern Rakhine. The Tatmadaw, the Burmese army, used the action to precipitate a relentless attack on the Arakan army, the militia of the Rohingya. The Rohingya are a stateless, mostly Muslim minority group and have faced years of persecution in Myanmar. Deep-seated tensions between them and the majority Buddhist population in Rakhine have led to deadly communal violence in the past. Nearly 1 million Rohingya fled the Rakhine state over the next few months, mostly into Bangladesh. So the theory goes that despite State Counsellor Suu Kyi's seeming indifference to the ethnic cleansing in the west of the country and her slow attempts at concessions to help the Rohingya repatriate, even that was too much for the Burmese army, whose intention was to finally rid Myanmar of the Rohingya. All this is speculation, but is probably a more likely scenario than trying to actually find 8.6 million fraudulent votes. What happened yesterday is not the first coup in the country's history. A 1962 coup brought the military to power. After a series of civilian protests known as the 8888 uprising, there was another coup in 1988, which provided the machinery for the current military junta that lasted 22 years. The official English name of the country was changed by the military government from the Union of Burma to the Union of Myanmar in 1989, and then later to the Republic of the Union of Myanmar. The country then began a series of democratic reforms in 2011 toward what the army called disciplined, flourishing democracy. At least it had the word democracy in it. The country's 2008 constitution guaranteed the military 25% of seats in parliament and veto power over any constitutional changes. An election in 2015, which brought Suu Kyi to power, was deemed its freest election in 25 years. But the military-penned constitution would retain sweeping powers, even the power to seize power if they deemed it necessary. In Time magazine, Dr. Lee Morgan-Besser of Griffith University, a political observer of Southeast Asian politics, says the motivation for the military is to remake the political status quo in the wake of the second election that saw the military-backed parties roundly routed. He said, given efforts by Aung San Suu Kyi's ruling government to curb the political power of the military, especially its fixed allotment of seats in parliament, the Tatmadaw acted preemptively. He also said that the military didn't want to see the popular 75-year-old Aung San Suu Kyi being given any further mandate for democratic reform. Her landslide victory against the military parties was a huge loss of face. The next few months will determine if the Burmese military can find a way to continue sharing power with more agreeable civilian politicians, or whether they've given up on such power sharing entirely. For now, they hold all the guns, but clearly against the will of the Burmese people.